Today on Switch to Linux, we want to talk about a malvertising campaign that hit a critical piece of software, and we need to be aware of it, and we need to raise a little bit more awareness about malvertising, which we talk a lot about on the weekly news roundup, but I realize not everybody watches that. So let's see what's going on. Welcome back to Switch to Linux, and today we will be talking about how Malvertising distributed a Trojan version of a major password manager, and we are going to talk about what this could mean and the ways that you want to be cautious with anything you're downloading from the internet. So let's go ahead and start in with a brief discussion of malvertising. So malvertising generally, now there has been a shift in the definition, and I like this article here from /gear because it is a much more modern article that does not just rehash the same out-of-date information that we had a long time ago. I looked at CrowdStrike, I looked at Malwarebytes. In fact, Malwarebytes article over here is not bad. It gives a tip of the hat to the change, but really malvertising has shifted a lot over the years, and we do want to chat a little bit about it. And we want to get into the history. We're going to talk about what this is in fine detail. So in the old history, malvertising basically meant that you were getting a drive-by malware attack. Just by visiting a website, an advertisement embedded in the page was itself an automatically executing virus. This is what was behind most of the tech support scams. A malvertising thing, you would land on a web page, all of a sudden a giant security warning would be up, it would lock you out, you couldn't use your mouse or your keyboard to get out of the page, and it was just a call this phone number now. And that was kind of the original malvertising. And it would appear that malvertising effectively started somewhere around 2007, 2008, I believe. We'll look at some of the history here in a bit for the closer dates to that. But once machines were infected, criminals could gain access to people's login details, OneDrive accounts, even cryptocurrency wallets. This was based on one of the first ones of this form discovered called Storm 0408. And what would happen here is you would land on the site, and the site would get you to click on a link down to download a piece of software that was hosted on GitHub. And then that would allow the hacker to get into your system and steal a bunch of data. So the article over here at /gear wants to talk a little bit about what it is. So it can refer to several times of criminal attacks. Tactics employed by cyber criminals have changed over the time. This means a lot of information on the web is now out of date. That is the paragraph why I included this particular article of all of them that I read. Because I went through and, as I said, I looked at a lot of other sites, and everything that I was getting everywhere was just all old, out-of-date stuff. Every bit of it talked about drive-by software executing through Flash. Welcome to 2025. We haven't had Flash for a long time. Okay. So I like that /gear actually mentioned what it started at, but like all things like malware, it shifted over the years to become kind of the new thing. So it's usually defined as a practice of embedding malware into seemingly legitimate online ads, but it can refer to advertisements which redirect you to malicious downloads. And that's how almost all malvertising is today. So 2007 was the first one. This was a malicious code embedded ads on legitimate websites. They had gone through several iterations since then. And really the modern version, as we said, there's a Storm 0408 required on the users to click the fake ad first. So in a recent attack detailed by Microsoft Threat Intelligence, users of several illegal movie downloads, it would then you'd click on the movie, and then it would give you a pop-up which would give you a security warning, and then you'd go to GitHub and actually download the malware from there. So this is kind of a merge. I think this was probably a transitional one. Nowadays, they're working with SEO poisoning. So it positions legitimate looking websites at the top of search engines, mostly by paid advertising. And this is really where we absolutely need to be running ad blockers. There's too much malware out there, and these websites are not doing a good enough job at actually stopping it. You know, they're like, hey, thanks for the money. Yeah, we won't really closely look at what you're doing. We'll just assume you're doing okay. Of course, all of us that are actually not doing bad things, we have to go through every hassle in the world to access our accounts. But the malvertiser, because they're dumping $1 million into it, yeah, we'll let you. You got some skin in the game here. The problem is one guy downloads it, man, you get way more than $1 million out of it. And that's kind of the problem. So the issue is widely reported last year. People were looking to download the Arc web browser, fell prey to the malvertising scam. Googling Arc download brought a sponsored result that looked like the real website, but were actually malvertisements. They even displayed the legitimate URL. And this is something that I had mentioned before several times when we talked about this on the weekly news roundup. He said, I run some Google ad campaigns for some clients. And when it comes to what's displayed, what you click on, what's displayed, the user of the ad account types that URL in. Okay. Now, in theory, Google should check the URL to make sure it's where you're being redirected, but they don't seem to always do that. So what is actually there on the page that you're seeing to click on is literally manually entered in by the person setting up the ad campaign, which may or may not be the exact page you're landing on. So they're going in and actually typing in the correct URL, but the actual link for the ad goes to usually a typo squatted URL or something similar there too that would make it look like it. In this case, I think it went to arc.info or something like that. I don't know. But it caused a lot of issues there, of course. And if you're searching for the name of a product or company, you got to check your spelling. Typo squatting is one way of using malvertising. A typo squatting is when somebody either registers a domain that is very close to the legitimate one. So there are examples here. NVIDIA, they drop that second I, NVIDIA, or Microsoft. You accidentally forget to type in the R and you do Microsoft. Those would be examples of typo squatting. Now, a good company with the actual resources should probably own all of the seemingly close typo squatted names if possible and just redirect all those back. It's going to prevent them from doing it. But, can a company really spend, $1 billion in domains to get every potential typo squatted? Well, some companies could, and it may or may not actually be a legitimate thing. They also say here, avoid using sponsored links on search results. Yeah, my thoughts exactly. Let's just use ad blockers and ignore the fact that there's ads on the internet. Okay. And they say this, scroll down to the non-sponsored content. They'll also register domains for legitimate services that have since expired. And even I have projects that I was doing before, but I stopped running the projects, but I kept the domain names so somebody can't typo squat them and steal information and things like that. So there's no option to click on other products or pages, contact terms and conditions. Then it's definitely suspect. If you land on a page and it all of the internal links all link back to the home page, there's a good sign. Look around because, SSLs are cheap now. So you're not just looking for an old site without an SSL anymore. You're not looking there's so many ways to duplicate somebody's site. Now, what Malwarebytes did is they did give us a little history of malvertising. So they say the first one occurred in late 2007 or early 2008 by exploiting a vulnerability in Adobe Flash, attacking a number of popular platforms, including MySpace. There's also the last time anybody ever mentioned MySpace, apparently, in articles. Readers were served up ads telling them that their system was infected with a ploy to trick them into installing malicious security software. You see 10, 11, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. And they say here, this is probably the biggest one. This starts in 2017. Zirconium, arguably the biggest malvertising campaign, when the organization brought an estimated $1 billion ads through the year. They designed its malicious ads to forced redirects to brought users to websites hosting fraudulent schemes or malware. This was at one point in time 62% of ad monetized websites each week. Malvertising actors have also gotten creative as of late. Cybercriminals are now taking over abandoned domains, in other words, websites the previous owner never renewed, to display malicious ads that force users onto fraudulent tech support scams. And so with this, what we're going to talk about here is KeePass was a victim of this. Now, some articles had KeePass was hacked. That's not true. Now we're talking about KeePass. We're not talking, the one I use personally and recommend is KeePass XC. And really the fundamental difference when they were forked is that KeePass is written in C#, requiring the .NET framework from Microsoft, although modern versions can run on the, is it Mono, I think, framework. So it's a compatibility layer. So you can get KeePass running inside of your repositories on Linux. But KeePass XC is written in C++, so it runs natively on Windows, Linux, and Mac. Additionally, since KeePass XC has been forked, they also support TOTP, which I think KeePass does now, but they also support passkeys, which I did not see any sign that KeePass actually supports. They could, I just don't know as much about the KeePass project. But KeePass is effectively native only on Windows, whereas KeePass XC is native Windows, Linux, Mac, and there are actually a lot of applications for Android and iOS in order to run either of their files. Mostly their files are compatible with each other. Of course, if you're storing passkeys in there, it may not be. So keep that in mind. It's probably good to pick one of them and stick with it unless you're ready to do a fully tested migration from one to the other. But what they did here, this is a very, very sophisticated attack. It includes typo squatting. It includes the actual open source code. It includes malvertising. This is a cornucopia, which is designed to get you to install the malicious copy of this application, and then it will allow it to extract all of your passwords in plain text and send it up to a command and control server. Now, the good news for those of us following this channel mostly is this is a Windows malware, so it does not run on Linux, and you need to be very, very careful if you're running KeePass on Windows to absolutely only get it from legitimate places. So the cybersecurity firm WithSecure had they did a long research into this. This link here will definitely be included. You can click over here. It's a 38-page report. You can see all of the nitty-gritty details. I'm going to leave this so you can go and read what they said directly. It's like I said, it's a large 38-page file. But this CyberPress article here did a really good job of really showing all of the ins and outs about what's going on here. So what they did here is they actually took the open source code and they basically added a few minor things into it that are hard to spot. So the whole thing still functions as a password manager, and in some of these instances it did not actually have signs of malware for several weeks after installing it, so that you couldn't easily trace it back to a simple download. Presumably after a couple of weeks, you would potentially forget, hey, maybe it's the use of Windows recall, right? Ask your Windows computer, what did we do a couple weeks ago? But anyway, what they did is they created a Trojanized KeePass installer containing a previously undocumented malware loader, which delivered a post-exploitation payloads and harvested credentials from the password databases. So they used the full open source code. So this is a question on open source. Of course, it is always good to have open source code, but this also means somebody can take it and redistribute it in some other way. Now, redistributing it in this way would be illegal, at least in most jurisdictions, but just be aware it's a distinct possibility. So with this, unlike the typical software trojanization, where malware components are simply bundled alongside legitimate installers, the attackers directly altered core functionalities. You remember, like, download something from like download.com or something, and you would get the legitimate application installed, but it's bundled with a bunch of crap and toolbars and things like that. That's kind of how they were doing it. But in this case here, instead of it being bundled as a separate standalone, it's embedded in the software code itself. So it designed to exfiltrate the contents of the KeePass database in clear text, including usernames, passwords, and associated metadata. And this is actually a function of KeePass, is you can export a plain text copy of everything. It is a feature built into KeePass. I'm not sure why. I mean, I kind of do, really. There is a use case for it, but they're basically using this and making a copy of it in a hidden location, and then their server is grabbing that and sending it out. So the malicious installer is signed with a valid trusted signing certificates, making it virtually indistinguishable from the legitimate versions and users and traditional antivirus solutions, because everything looks secure. So they used a series of lookalike domains with authentic sounding certificates, and then initially advertise it through Malvertising, primarily through Bing and DuckDuckGo. So they're even targeting, at least targeting DuckDuckGo search engine. They're targeting the advertisements placed on DuckDuckGo with Malvertising. Those are the people most likely to be downloading a password manager. And Bing, and I don't know, presumably there were some on Google, but they did mention here Bing and DuckDuckGo. They lured victims onto typo-squatted and spoofed KeePass-themed domains like KeePass-info.inaze.com and KeePassword. Today, Junior, right? Unsuspecting users downloading KeePass from these sources received the Trojanized installers. So additionally, when you would install it, hold on, there's a few things I didn't actually highlight here, but it drops a modified binaries into the local app directory and establishes a persistence via an auto-run register key, and then it deploys a encrypted Cobalt Strike payload disguised as a JPEG file. I can only imagine you pull out that JPEG, it says you're screwed, right? The loader's execution flow leverage enum font's W callback function to decrypt and load it, minimizing the forensic footprint and resisting sandbox detection. So the beacon established a command and control server over HTTPS. So they're using encryption there. Communicating with the attacker on archonline.com and is it AICMAS.com. So exporting, it would get in there and it would export the CSV file to a local application directory and then remotely retrieve these with the Cobalt Strike sessions. And then what they did here is they also added some anti-analysis features and minimal code changes relative to the baseline KeePass builds, which would minimize the impact that it looked like it was actually a piece of malware. So they used domain registration, hosting, certificate insurance practices to suggest overlapping with other well-known operations like Nitrogen Loader and is it Rum? I don't know that one. Never heard of that second one there. Ramamanthes. With Secure's investigation identified multiple install variants over an 8-month period, underscoring the evolving nature of the threat. And they did mention here that this is a potential danger of open source if you are not sourcing the code correctly. Now, those of us using Linux, if we're using our repositories, generally speaking, we are in much better shape than if we're downloading stuff from the internet. In my case, I actually have my systems, at least my Linux Mint systems are actually set with the Ubuntu PPAs to download the code directly from KeePass XC, which also increases the chance that it's being safer. I didn't do that on Arch or MX Linux because both Arch and MX Linux supports the passkey features that I'm looking to implement here in the near future. They have a lot of different payload information here. We're not covering all that in fine detail. You can check the articles for that. And this article here from Undercode Testing gave a lot of good advice if you think or suspect if you've downloaded KeePass lately for Windows, you might want to walk through this guide. It's going to tell you the official places to download it. It's going to give you the official checksums of the individual files. It looks at where is your what are your email domains going to be running from, and then it's telling you to look for running processes of the malware. So there's a number of different things it has over here. Now, of concern to me, KeePass does not yet have any information on its own website about this breach. It's possible they're working on it. So this was actually first spotted here last week in May 13th is when Cyberpress did its release. I don't know exactly when they did theirs. So they did theirs on May 8th. So we're only talking about 10, 11 days ago. But for a major security thing, KeePass should have a blog post out at least warning people about this. If nothing else, then it will move them up into the SEO if somebody's searching for the KeePass hack or KeePass issue. It should get up there directly from them. And I did actually look on their forums as well. I didn't see anything in the forums there. I'm not saying that they're never going to have anything. I'm not saying that they're bad for not including this. What I am just saying is, as of right now when I'm recording this, despite the this potential breach has been out for over a week, we still do not have any official warning from the official distributors of KeePass about it. KeePass XE has also not addressed it, whereas they have actually addressed similar vulnerabilities on their page, mostly because, in looking at the forum here, if you're on KeePass XE and you have a question, you might actually accidentally post it on KeePass's forum, and many people with KeePass issues sometimes support to the KeePass XE forums, so they sometimes cross-post each other's security bulletins. I didn't see it on either of those either. So I guess ultimately our big take-home message is here: if you are using a operating system that requires you to download things from the internet, you need to make extra sure where you're downloading it from, and do not use advertisement links to download software. Whether if you're looking for Etcher or whether you're looking for KeePass, whatever you do, do not click the sponsored links. Click on the official links and verify they are the official links. And then do a little bit of extra work. Of course, this is where Linux is good with the software repositories. This is honestly where Windows is good at moving a lot of its software into the store itself. It is a good thing that Windows is working on a software store, assuming that they are doing a good job of vetting things and not just allowing everybody to get in there. Now, understand the difference though. Linux, when I go into the terminal or just the basic software manager, like on Linux Mint, I pull up my software installer. That software has all been vetted in some way by the Linux Mint team. It is in there. It is well-known, well-sourced applications. Whereas, unfortunately, the Flatpaks and the snaps, it's pretty much up to the people distributing it, which is why we have seen malware enter those venues easier than we have seen malware enter repositories. And that is a downside of the Windows Store, is that if Microsoft is not completely and fully vetting everything, that is a problem. But you also have to remember how much malware gets into Android through the Google Play Store, which allegedly audits stuff, but apparently does a really bad job. Of course, the Apple Store, also they vet things. I think Apple, though, does do a lot better job at vetting things. A few malicious applications have snuck past, but by and large, it's not nearly the quantity of what sneaks past Android. But look at the official sources on Linux. Definitely use the repositories far before you're using the Flatpaks. In my case, I could have installed it via the Flatpak to get the latest version, but I actually preferred grabbing it from the repository, from the PPA repository directly from them. Even though I believe they are actually the ones packaging theirs, and we're talking about KeePass XC. Let me look at that real quick. So looking at FlatHub itself, and you can see that it is verified by the actual KeePass XC team. So yes, I would absolutely trust the Flatpak here for KeePass XC as well. I just prefer using repository software over Flatpaks if ever I can. Use ad blockers. Ad blockers are going to block malvertising campaigns. Shocker, I know. So definitely use those. If you're not using it, then just do not click on sponsored links. I'm not sure anything good ever comes from it. Isn't it kind of funny? Our entire economy of our entire world is held up by the one system that the scammers use to push nonsense through their systems, because the advertising networks are more interested in the money than they are interested in fixing the malware. So always verify your download sources, be aware of malicious actors, and absolutely stick with the open source software, but stick with the open source software that has been vetted over time. So there's our thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. Do you use KeePass? Do you use KeePass XC? Or what's your favorite password manager? Let me know down below. And I will leave you with an introduction to KeePass XC, the one that I use here on Linux, and it is fully cross-platform, Windows, Linux, Mac, and I use the KeePass DX for my Graphene OS tablet to manage passwords over there. I'll leave you with the introduction to KeePass XC on the screen. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below.